will planning and decision makers, what will we do with all this input that we receive? I think the point that I'm trying to make and the approach that we were trying to take with this study is really to make this state law work with all of the local planning ideals and policy goals that we have. So the input that we're receiving isn't just from this planning process, but is also from the housing element, where we did 30 community meetings, have a community advisory body. Also from Prop K, where we heard people want middle income housing, and we heard people want 33% affordable housing. So I think at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is make all of these goals work and move forward in our city. So I think we are interested in the specific context. Comments?
Many of the mandated decisions are not, they're very narrow margins. You know, I don't think people are necessarily people. And when you refer to the views,
maybe we should talk more after. I want to get into the specific questions. I think that we could talk about that for 2 weeks, perhaps.
Okay, so why don't we do this? You all have been patient, and many of you have written down your questions on these cards. And I'm going to sort of go through them one by one. I sort of group them into some categories, but I'm going to read them unedited, unvarnished, and for the most part, ask Kirsten to respond. There are some that, toward the end, that are more opinion and more large question related. I'm still going to read those out. I'm not sure we'll have satisfactory. We don't want to get into a rebuttal kind of thing, but we'll go through those as well. And then, if any of you haven't written down questions and still have questions, we'll open it up to the floor at the end. Okay? So let me start. The first clump of questions is really about, and Andy's sorting through a few more here, so we may get some incoming from the side. But the first clump of questions really has to do with understanding what the program is. The second couple of questions really have to do with what about kind of monitoring and follow-up and cost of the program kind of things. And then the final are more, what are the bigger alternatives here, including repealing the state law and so forth and so on. So we'll kind of clump them into those categories. So, Kirsten, I hope you're ready for this rapid fire round. The first question is, the affordable housing bonus program would apply to more than 30,000 parcels throughout the city. Yet you predict only about 240 parcels or soft sites that might take advantage of the program. Why are you subjecting 30,000 parcels to a program that really applies to less than 1%? You alluded to this in your talk, and I think it's important to come back to that point. We have sort of a large group of eligible parcels. We're estimating a much smaller percentage, like about 1% of those might actually take advantage of the program, but why the larger catchment?
Yeah, this is actually the approach that we took with the Eastern neighborhoods, with Market Octavia, sort of with all of our planning efforts. We don't do parcel by parcel or spot zoning, in part because that's illegal, to sort of tell you this chair gives you these rights, but this chair gives you totally different rights, is actually one of the major findings in planning law, is that you have to sort of do it sort of broadly. What's the word I'm looking for?
At the district scale.
At the district scale. So that's why we took the approach. Also, the last time we changed our zoning in the city of San Francisco, in most of these neighborhoods, was the late 70s. So this is a way to just sort of modernize the whole district. So it doesn't mean to say that we're going to change all the buildings, but we don't want a planning code that's 27 chapters long, so we don't have more and more districts. In the late 70s, what we did was we took all of the western sides of the city, actually all the districts that this program applies to, and we provided height limits and density limits where there never had been. So this is actually our way of kind of going and updating that set of thinking. I don't know if you have more to add.
And there's a corollary question, which is a very direct one. Your 240 properties total is a hypothetical. You cannot guarantee that that will be the maximum, can you?
No, I cannot guarantee that that will be the maximum. What we did was take a look at what our financial consultant said would pencil. And then we took a look at what kind of site conditions people have been developing in. But we also feel that the monitoring program that's complementing this program will really help us make sure that we're on target with our development potential. And I think somebody asked questions about transportation services and school services, so I want to get back to your question about that, because it is really important to make sure that we're growing the way we're planning to grow. And the 240 sites and the number of units we think that that could support, we have checked on our water supply, we have checked on our transportation, and all of the other things that CEQA require us to check on to make sure we can accommodate that amount. So our monitoring program, which requires that we report to our board and our commission every year on the productivity of this program, and then every several years do a deeper dive look, will help make sure that we stay on course with our planning goal of having this only produce a certain amount of units. To be totally clear, we don't think that there are going to be 240 development sites in the next 5 years that all take advantage of this program. It's really a 20-year time frame that we think that that might even happen in. So I think when we worked on Eastern neighborhoods in Market Octavia, I worked in Market Octavia, so I know those numbers off the top of my head. We thought, well, that's going to generate 6,000 new housing units over 20 years. Now we're 12, 13 years into it, and we haven't even hit the halfway mark yet. So these things, even that major upzoning, it really takes a lot of time, and the process that we have outlined still, there's lots of opportunity for us to fine-tune. Eastern neighborhoods, Market Octavia, they've been updated several times. So whatever program makes it through this long process, through our planning commission, through our board, will also be fine-tuned throughout those 20 years.
And I want to just reiterate the obvious, as I said at the beginning, this is not a debate. We're trying to answer your questions, clarify as much as we can, and also use your information in our thinking about not only how to better explain the program going forward, but also potentially modify that and to raise these issues to the boards and commissions and the supervisors that will be ultimately deciding on this later in the year. So let me move to the next question. Does the local AHPB apply to new construction only?
Yes, all of the programs before you apply to new construction only.
What is the plan? I think you responded to this, but let's just be really clear. What's the plan for people in rent-controlled units if there is a demolition? Is there a fund to pay for moving those renters and rent assistance in the future? What type of demolition controls for residential houses?
So to be crystal clear, what we've said is moving forward, this program will not be available for sites that have a rent control unit. So that question is not relevant, and we're hoping to spend a lot of time answering every detail of that question before we even consider making this program available for sites that have rent control units.
But what's to keep those people from deciding they're going to house everybody, and then they're not rent controlled? And
Supervisor Breed is ahead of you. She's saying any units that have been rent controlled, and I think we're deciding within starting 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So we're trying to avoid all of those scenarios.
Those tricky things.
Although, are you looking for a job? Because
Good question. This is a very similar question, but I want to make sure that I'm just reading people's actual words. Is this 100% about buildings to be developed and built, or will any part of this impact existing rental units that do not get torn down, especially non-rent controlled units?
So we have been really clear that this is about new construction. What we really don't want is for this to be a way for someone to empty out a building because they're adding a story or two. So this is only for 100% new construction projects. So if you're living in a neighborhood with lots of beautiful historic buildings, your neighbors won't be able to use this to add a story to their building.
Okay, and on the subject of height, does the Affordable Housing Bonus Program override height limit restrictions? If so, is there a limit on how much additional height can be added?
Yes, it does override the existing height limits. Under the state analyzed program, there's a formula in the planning code. What we really don't want, and what the design is to avoid the developer negotiating with the planning department around what height they need. So that's totally off the boards. Instead, there's a formula in the planning code that says, if this, then that, blah, blah, blah. Basically, if your volume can fit the 35% density bonus, then you get no heights. If your volume needs to grow by X percent or X number of square feet, you get half a floor, 1 floor, up to 2 stories. We tested it. We tested the formula on the 240 sites. Less than half need heights at all. Most of them that need heights need 1 story. A few need 2 stories. Under the local program, everybody is available, 2 stories is available to all of the sites that choose that option.
So just to clarify, if they don't need the additional height, then that's not available.
Under the state analyzed, correct.
The local is, we have up to 2.
Correct.
So which one was taking precedence?
To be crystal clear, you own a site, or in this case, the chair. You can choose to do neither, to do the state program or to do the local program. It's the choice of the developer.
But locally, it could be 2 if they want it, whether you like it or not.
Correct.
And the same is true with the density factor.
Uh,
There's a site currently that has a 40-foot height limit and a 50% coverage area, or whatever number you might select. How much can they alter your neighborhood to suit themselves under these 2 proposals, state and local?
the state program, the question was, you've got a particular site, what can a developer do? And under the state program, if they were maxing it out, they could add 35% more than the permitted density or number of units. And in some cases, 1 or 2 stories in some cases. And that really depends on the specifics of the site. It's almost impossible, even if you gave me a lot of detail, for me to do it in my head, whether a site would need 1 or 2 stories. Under the local program, they would get 2 stories. They would be able to ask for 2 stories of height.
Even though they're screwing everybody else out of their view, or their sunlight, or their,
Well, that's really part of the reason for coming out and for you to debate this and for the decision makers to debate it. What's that trade-off? But
in other words, it doesn't make a damn bit of difference how much it screws the neighborhood. They can do it whether you like it or not, and there's nothing you can do about it.
well, yeah. Yes, but
Never mind all the BS.
whoa, let's be civil. Let's be civil, and we're giving you the best answers we can give you.
Simple, but it's not clear, no matter how much you say. Either they can do it no matter what, or they can't. That's what I want to know.
Okay, so they can add up to 2 stories.
No matter whether you like it, or it blocks your view, or it stops the sunshine, or what, it doesn't matter.
Yes, but they still have to go through a permitting process, and there are some design standards that are being contemplated here. That's not something that Kirsten touched on, but didn't elaborate on, and that's something that the Planning Commission is debating right now about what should be the design standards that accompany any of those requests for additional height.
Can we clarify something on this before we go on? Because I think it's pretty important. Okay, it's not accurate to say there's no difference in notice and there's no difference in the planning commission. Because right now, we have mapped height limits, say it's 40 foot. And the Board of Supervisors has passed that as an ordinance. And to change it, they would have to pass another ordinance. I'm sure you agree with that.
Yes.
And in addition, you would have the right of referendum. The people can put on the ballot within 30 days to measure to overturn a height limit change passed by the board ordinance if they don't like it. They know that. Yeah. But at least you have notice of the planning process to change the zoning so you know about it. So under your program, however, we lose our right of referendum and we lose our right to go to the board and say, don't pass a change to the 40-foot height limit. Because you passed this citywide, and it gives them an automatic override of 2 extra stories under the local program, and I'm sure you agree with that. And so we wouldn't get notice. And not only that, so basically you get notice that there's a project coming and it's under the local program. And you get notice that there's a planning commission hearing. But also, the commission's rights are reduced because you're giving weakened design guidelines, and it says all the commission can do is make minor modifications, and they have to approve the thing within the weakened design guidelines, and they understand that the buildings will be taller and bulkier. So you're losing rights of what the planning commission can do, as well as citizen rights to go to the ballot and fight at the board of supervisors. And those are long-standing rights. That's why this is a game changer, and people are very, very upset about it.
I appreciate you expressing that opinion. I'm not sure about whether or not this ordinance is referable to the voters, but on a project-by-project basis, no, it wouldn't be. You're right to say, and that's why we're here to say, under the local program, you could add 2 stories to the existing.
So I'm not entirely sure why we're here.
Well, right. That's a perfectly legitimate opinion. We're not here to debate that. We're just explaining
So
what
I
the proposal
have a
is.
question. I'm not entirely sure. It says here, is it clear why we're here or we accomplished our goal? Was it your goal to just explain this to us so we're aware of it? Was it your goal to get input? Is there any notification, any change that can happen? I just don't understand what the purpose of the
tonight.
presentation is, the way it's being done, because there's so many questions.
Well, we're trying to get through the questions. The purpose of
Well, it's not.
the purpose of tonight was to come out and explain what the program is and to answer your questions about what that is. In case it wasn't clear from our explanation, it's always good to have this kind of thing.
But the program's set.
No.
The program is not set. That's what I was trying to say at the very beginning. We want to get through what is this program, what is the proposal, and what are your concerns about it. So we're taking down those concerns. We've got people here who are taking down those
Are you taking
concerns.
notes on Kathy's comment?
Yeah,
But it's
In one sentence, you got Kathy's comments.
You just said.
I'm sorry.
You said it was going to go to the planning commission and be
Yeah, there's
voted on.
a hearing on the 28th, and we will be taking these comments forward. We'll be summarizing all of these comments. That's a public hearing, so you should come out and speak to the planning commission as well. Whether they make a decision that night or not is up to them.
I just want to clarify that this legislation was introduced on September 29th, and already my team have gathered a lot of input from community meetings. We anticipate that the board will introduce a substitute legislation next week that incorporates a lot of the comments we've received so far, and we don't think that the legislation, as will be revised next week, will be the version that is adopted or voted on. The legislative process always includes a proposal that gets modified through the public process. And everyone here is frustrated because they feel like this proposal has been baked without them. I've been on the other side where we're doing the housing element process where I'm like, what do you guys want? And they're like, community members are frustrated because they're like, we need something to react to. So it's either way, it's a very hard conversation to have. So I think what Gil is trying to underscore is we are here with a proposal, looking for ways to refine that proposal.
We've been through a lot of proposals ourselves, where we've been asked for input, and then it hasn't happened the way we wanted, so we're very sensitive to that.
And it's frustrating. And
That's
one,
totally understood. I get that, and I don't want to argue or debate that. And we may or may not respond to everything in the revised proposal, right? And so that's why you have public bodies that take votes, and at the ultimate level, they're elected. So, but what we can promise you is that we're listening very faithfully and carefully to your questions, and that our responses to those questions will take a couple of forms. One is that we answer the question so there's better public disclosure about what it is. And the second is that it may cause us to rethink some aspects of the proposal. In either case, we forward those to the public body.
But you're not obligated to take our input. I mean, if this were a measure, I mean...
Well, if we were a measure, you'd vote up or down. You'd vote up or down. In this case, the Board of
I
Supervisors.
mean, we could have all these meetings and completely ignore us, and the time scale that we have, and, you know, I tried to read it. I mean, it's like 40 some odd pages, and it's very difficult to read, and so we're essentially trusting you, what your interpretation of this. And, you know, I don't doubt your standing as professionals, but, I mean, as far as third-party review, kind of loopholes there are, I mean, I understand that across the board, there's a need for affordable housing in the city, but, I mean, there's tons of developers out there, you know, Prado, for example, I mean, we don't know exactly what their plans are. And so, I mean, I think part of the fear and the anger here is just, we've got this legalese to decipher. We have until the 28th, until the process gets rolling, and, you know, we don't really have time to react.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And what I can tell you is from a staff point of view, this is not being ramrodded, even though that
It's not?
No, seems close. But as again, we've been out in public since September with this. What we can say about that hearing of the planning commission is scheduled is that it's perfectly legitimate to come forward and for you all to say, we have these concerns about it, or we haven't had enough time to look at it. And they need to decide, as appointed officials, how they want to react to that. We will, as I said, faithfully do our best to record and understand all your questions and do our best to respond to it. Ultimately, part of the process is in front of those public bodies and public hearing. I don't want to diminish your concerns. I hear those. It's very much a part of the work that we do, and we try to be as responsive as we can. And that's all I can say. I would like to get through the rest of the questions because some people are not speaking up and went through and patiently wrote down their questions, and I'd like to at least get through those. We'll again open it up at the end for those of you who want to stay to do a little bit more of this open-ended dialogue. But if I could, just let me get here. So there are two very closely related questions. I'm going to read them together. What are current minimum square footage standards? And I assume that means for the unit sizes. The second question, can we guarantee a minimum square footage per unit type? Studio, one bedroom, two bedroom, etc.
That's a great question. I think I've heard that in about every room that I've presented this to. So just to be totally clear, in most of the city, there's no unit mix requirement, meaning people can build all one bedroom, two bedroom, three bedroom, four bedroom, whatever they want. In the eastern neighborhoods and Market Octavia, we changed that because we wanted to make sure we were getting a mix of unit types. And we said you have to make at least 40% of those units two bedrooms. In our local program, we've also added that requirement. So for the local program, we're saying you have to make sure at least 40% of the units have two bedrooms. The other thing we try, or more, and the other thing we've tried in eastern neighborhoods was to encourage 3-bedroom units. So we said 40% 2-bedroom or 30% 3-bedroom. I think exactly nobody has chosen to build 3-bedroom units. And so we worked with our architects, Open Scope and David Baker, to figure out how can we better encourage 3-bedroom units in the local program. And so we've made an equivalency chart. Instead of 40% 2-bedroom, you can do the equal square footage or number of bedrooms in 3-bedroom units. So we're hoping, and our early feedback from architects, not just our consultants, but other architects are, this will incentivize a broader range of unit type under the local program. So 1s, 2s, and 3s.
Could you answer the question?
But there is not, I'm getting to it, but there is not in the planning code, a minimum size for a unit. We do have a standard for micro units and then standard units. Micro units are not eligible for this program, and the building code has a requirement for life and safety standards around unit size.
What is it?
Pop quiz, I'll email you.
What?
I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I'll email you.
It's pretty
Rashi.
small. It's like 200 square feet, 230 square feet. So the next question, do affordable income brackets inflate over time to represent the impact of cost of living, CPI? So when we do that, a double question.
Sure. So every year, HUD, the federal government, HCD, the state government, and the city of San Francisco update our income tables. So they do react to the changes in our market.
And the second part of this is the city subsidizing AHPB rents to building owners to make up for loss of rental income?
No, that's one of the really great things about this program. We think it could produce up to 5,000 affordable housing units. without public subsidy. And how are those developers affording these units or affording to subsidize them is the revenue they generate through the additional market rate units. So Gil taught me this word, which I really like, which is sort of an internal subsidy. So the building internally subsidizes the affordable units with those extra market rate.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how you quantify those, the additional height as being an impact, yeah. Does affordable housing bonus program make any distinction based on the size of development? For example, 3333 California could potentially be close to 1,000 units under this program, which is 5 times larger than the current allowable heights in the neighborhood of which it is a part.
I don't know that site. Okay. I'm still not going to know that. I mean, I believe you, but I don't know the details of that site. So what I want to say is that it treats each lot size similarly because the density ratios are consistent with that. A site of that scale, anything that's going towards the 1,000 number of units, we usually don't sort of just entitle by right. They usually go through a negotiated process called a development agreement with the city. I think a lot of people are mentioning to me, especially in this room, about what about all the external costs? What about the need for transit? What about the need for schools and open space? And we do have impact fees that projects pay to help us keep up to pace on those things. But when it gets to a project of that scale, we usually want to make sure the site also includes certain kinds of amenities to help support it. So that would be my answer on really large scale projects.
Yeah, and if the person who authored this question wants to come up and give us your contact information afterwards, we can give you some details about that site. We just can't speak off the top of our heads about a particular development project. But Kirsten's right, it sounds like a mega project, and if it is the site that was mentioned, it would have its own major discretionary review process. But again, we'll be happy to follow up with the individual. Next question, how is the fee that is paid in lieu of building affordable units spent? People move, okay, why don't we have that question then?
So,
follow.
The way affordable housing is built today in the city of San Francisco is our mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development accrues a number of different revenue sources and helps bundle them all together to have nonprofit affordable housing developers build the sites. And they have about as many mechanisms as there are people in this room, but the inclusionary housing fee is paid into a citywide affordable housing fund. And then the Mayor's Office of Housing will use that funds as a local match for state or federal money to help build 100% affordable projects.
The second point here is not really in the form of a question. We'll take it more as a concern. People move here for the context, but the context is changing when businesses, flats, for example, are replaced by housing. And could this program, I guess the inference here is, could this program incent more housing on some of those sites as infill? And I think the question is, yes, hypothetically. The question is kind of the economics. Does that commercial building pay enough that nobody would want to tear it down and replace it with housing at that cost? And so that's a kind of case-by-case judgment, but if that's the inference of the question, sure, that's a possibility here that this program could incent redevelopment of some sites like the flat site.
That was my question.
Okay.
And so we changed the context, and the context isn't there anymore. Places like flats are gone, and that, that's an old business that people have loved for very much. Gas stations, for example, gasoline stations are thrown down and changed to housing, and it makes purchasing gas in San Francisco rare, hard to find sometimes, and there's more competition, and we pay higher prices as a result of that. So we have this context that's changing as a result of these programs that take down these one-story commercial businesses.
Yeah, no, that's true. And this would incrementally add to that redevelopment incentive. No question. I think the flat site itself is probably not in one of these districts. It's actually in a different district than that.
It's done too.
That's going forward with a planned development site anyway, a proposal, absent this program. It's still the same concern, but in that particular case, this program is not
Is that what it's
accepting that. Yeah.
Could you use the mic?
But as a general rule, I think that's a fair statement, that this will add some incentive to redevelop those sites that may be essentially one-story commercial buildings.
Well, that's a major concern in the neighborhoods. For example, in the Richmond district, there are a lot of one-story, two-story commercial stores that have been there for a long time, and they're neighborhood serving, and this would incentivize demolition, and those stores will have to leave, and they probably will never come back. So
I
it
want
would
to be careful
destroy.
how I answer. I totally get your concern, and in some cases, yes. In many cases with going businesses, it probably wouldn't make sense to, when you look at the net change in revenue, it probably wouldn't make sense on an individual basis to do that. But at some point, it might. And so we don't want to make promises that that incentive is there.
Well, those are soft sites.
At some scale, those incentives. Sorry. At some scale, those incentives make sense for private.
I think those are soft sites that have been identified.
Yeah, and clearly there are some one-story commercial buildings that could change because of that additional incentive here.
When you talk about mid-block buildings, all the examples you showed were corner buildings, in which it's really very much in current mode to put bigger buildings up at corners, I understand. What happens when you have these smaller one-story commercials, mid-block or not at the end of the block? Aren't you going to end up with a big building that overshadows the rest of the building on that block? Particularly since you no longer have height limits.
That's a great question. So there are height limits, they're just a little bit higher. But there are height limits, right? So a lot of the examples, and I'd invite you to kind of look at some of the renderings David Baker did that are up here, are mid-block. Because I think that is a question that a lot of people have been asking. You know, our 1920s buildings are mostly, yeah. So some of these different ones are mid-block, and we have really looked at that question. And I've also been working on this project for about 2.5 years, and I'm a pretty big walker, so I've been walking the city looking for examples of mid-block corner. Is that true? Is that pattern real? And I'd invite you to do that too, because there are a number of blocks in our city, especially sort of in Russian Hill and that area, where the mid-block is actually the taller part of the area. So you're walking around the city with the maybe a particular block in mind and kind of thinking that that's what our context is, but it's actually quite varied. So I'd invite you to take a look at that.
But the simple answer to your question is yes. I mean, this would apply whether it's mid-block or corner block, and that illustration is just one. You can see the sort of current height limit and the additional two stories.
That picture is taken from a different perspective. Why didn't you take a picture from the little building right next to the building with the 2 stories? This is fine. That wouldn't bother me at all 2 blocks away. If I was living right next to that building, it wouldn't look like that view. It would be looking just straight up at this 40 foot more.
We're actually working on more materials with David Baker, and one thing we're working on is a full look around of the buildings.
You need to do that.
I agree.
Okay, so good comments. We'll do more of those.
Mid-block. What if everybody was in all the block sites? Are we going to have hallways? What if Chestnut Street, for instance, which has a lot of low stories and a few taller buildings, what if all those landowners decide to go for it, decide to go up? Is it going to be
That's a great question. I think there's 2 answers to that. One, what is the value of those existing buildings, and would it make sense to demolish them and then rebuild them?
they're going to be more up?
I think you'd be surprised on the finances of that, and I think that's one of the next things we're going to do is provide a financial picture of what is it like to buy a building and consider demoing and replacing. It's quite expensive, but that's the first thing. And then the second thing I would say is we are monitoring this program on an annual basis. That is by far and away no one who's working on the programs in town.
If we allow them to happen, how are we going to be guaranteed that you're not going to allow all? You're monitoring, what's the control? What's the?
You can't say no.
We're looking at the monitoring program, and I'll send that around to whoever is hosting us so that you get a look at it. I'll send it to Jess, and you can share it with folks. Really, points out what our policy goals are and what we should be presenting to the commission and our board. Here's our goals, how are we performing? Okay, we're off here. Is that in a direction we do or do not want to be? So I think that may not be the perfect answer, but that's where we are.
But so it's one thing to have policy goals, and I think everyone here is on board with not wanting to incentivize demolition and kicking out uncontrolled arguments and have these huge 60-foot towers. But the market's sort of crazy, and let's say everything in the South Bay, like Facebook, Snapchat, whatever, if that blows up, could the financials? Could we have a situation where the financials make sense for a developer to say, okay, I'm going to buy a site, demo it, and go local and add the 2 stories, and so under 30% affordable housing, I've got 18% of $100,000 earners plus, and to me those aren't the people who need help. The people who need help are the people in mission who are very, very bottom, right? So, have you guys thought about sort of what if a scenario like that were to happen, if the market were to make it variable to do a complete demolition and rebuild? What actions would you take? Do you have a plan B?
Well, I think both these last questions are really important, that we need to think about and clarify what is that feedback process. What I will say is going into this, we try to be pretty cautious about that in the sense that this financial analysis we use, remember, they're not getting 2 stories just because. They're getting 2 stories for providing 30% of these units as affordable, which they're not making money on, they're losing money on. So we got pretty close to what the market is saying now, is sort of an incremental incentive, but not a huge incentive. Now, we have to keep our eye on that because, as you say, markets change. Conceivably, the market can get even more superheated than it is right now, and development sites are more rare. So that's quite possible. And so I think that we want to take both your questions under consideration about what is that feedback process.
I also want to add one thought to that before we go to the next card, which is there are a number of buildings in the city that are developed below their existing height limit and a number that are developed above. Those that are developed below sort of still have that. I could make my building so much bigger, and they're not doing it. And I think that is even without that 30% affordable requirement. So it's very... I get the reaction of 2 stories is going to cause all this financial benefit, but I think understanding that there are many buildings that currently are in that condition and haven't even moved at all might help us feel more comfortable with that.